Shobha Shetty. It's so nice to meet you, Global Director of Agriculture and Food for the World Bank. Major announcement today, doubling actually the bank's commitment to $9 billion annually for agrifinance and agribusiness. Why that commitment now?
Nice to meet you too, Tony. It's good to be here. I think this is a really important juncture for us, especially in the context of achieving the SDG goal of zero hunger and the climate change that agriculture is subject to, but also agriculture is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So this is basically, it's just a perfect storm where we need to address both the short-term issues around agriculture and food security, but also really address some of the longer-term resilience in the sector and for smallholders that are really core to what we're doing.
Yeah. So I want to break that down because I think that's at the core of the conversation as well. We're talking really about three different things. We're talking about people, we're talking about policy, and we're talking about the planet. When it comes to people, there's like the immediate and urgent need of hunger, which is only becoming more acute. There are projections that by 2030, there could be as many as 600 million people living in acute hunger. But then there's also the reality that the population is expanding. And by 2050, just 20 years after that, there will be 10 million people on the planet. So how does this address both the immediate needs while also preparing for the future?
Right. You look at Gaza, or you look at Sudan. I mean, the problems of famine and hunger are very real and very acute. And we recognize that these are the crises that we have to work along with our humanitarian development, humanitarian partners like WFP, the World Food Program, and the like, to help address these really sort of short-term food crises. But at the same time, we also need to invest in building systems, building resilience. And you talked about, the population reaching, by 2050, it's going to be 10 billion. And this will need an additional 50 to 60% increase in food production because diets are changing. The world is urbanizing. So, with all these dietary changes and so on, food production really needs to ramp up. And that's why the need now, given the fact that agriculture and food face all these challenges, it's climate change, farmers don't have access to finance, it's everything sort of coming together. This is an industry, this is a sector that really has the potential, and, everyone's got to eat. So we've got to produce the food, but we have to produce it much more sustainably going forward.
Seems like there's a lot of skilling that's going to be involved there as well, right? Because if you're talking about rural and in developing countries or regions, is there a plan to concurrently, put these new sort of agribusiness practices in place while you're also giving people those digital skills? I'm sure data, God knows AI is on everybody's mind right
absolutely.
now, but that requires a whole different level of education.
Right. No, and I think, that's absolutely, absolutely on the dot there. And I think you can't really call it farming anymore. I mean, we're calling them agripreneurs, for example, right? So these are the young people who see agriculture as a business and who get the necessary sort of skills and training to be able to really make it profitable and make more incomes, right? So this is not your grandfather's agriculture. So this is the sort of the new generation agriculture. And to make that more attractive to the youth, I think they need to be, you have to professionalize the sector. And this is what we're doing actually through a number of our agricultural education projects. We have a lot of financial literacy training and, working with rural enterprises, for example, in India. So all of this, I think, help to create sort of that base of skilled agripreneurs and agriculture professionals who can really leverage these technologies and the instruments that are out there to help grow their business and improve their incomes.
I was really struck, speaking of young people and emerging careers, 1.2 billion people in the next decade will enter the workforce, and there are only 420 million jobs projected to be available. So are you saying agriculture could fill that gap? It seems like a lot of agriculture jobs.
No, you're quite right. It's not, we have to look at agriculture as not just agriculture. We look at it as a value chain, right? So it's from farm to fork. So you're talking about, production, but it goes beyond production. You're talking about warehousing, you're talking about logistics, you're talking about processing, the food service business. This is all agriculture and food. It's the whole chain, and this is where we're going to create the jobs, right? It's not going to be just on the production side alone. You really have to look at it from the entire value chain. And yes, I think absolutely, if you look at any country, even middle income countries, you have more than 50% are still working in agriculture as their primary source of employment. So I think there's huge potential to transform this sector into, really becoming, you have the value addition, you make it more commercial, but at the same time, you keep the smallholder farmers and their organizations at the center of the agenda, because that I think is also really critical to make sure that smallholders are able to connect to markets, connect to finance, connect to technology, and they can do it, if they're part of an aggregate like a producer organization or a cooperative.
Finally, you mentioned agriculture right now is actually a big producer of carbon emissions. Mm-hmm. So as we look to the future, water scarcity, decarbonization, how do you grow agriculture at this scale without further contributing to climate change?
Now, that's a fantastic question, and it's something that we deal with in our programs all the time. Essentially, yes, agriculture and food is subjected to many of these climate shocks, climate risks, but at the same time is also a contributor to climate change. So what we are doing through our programs is really providing the incentives to farmers and producer organizations to really switch to more climate smart agricultural practices. So for example, in rice in Vietnam, we are helping the government there to help reduce emissions from rice production, which contributes huge amounts to their GHG emissions, right? Similarly for livestock, we want to introduce practices that really reduce emissions from livestock, have more sustainable livestock management. So we believe the low-hanging fruit is really sort of incentivizing farmers and farmer groups to really adopt climate smart agricultural practices. And this is the way, because the problem is not in agriculture. The agriculture is also the solution to climate change, because we have loads of technologies out there, lots of research that can really help bring the emission intensity of agriculture down.
Shobha Shetty, thanks so much for coming by.
Thanks, Tony. It was a pleasure.